David, I wanted to ask you about a story that I saw about the immigration policy. I'm really troubled, as you know, by the immigration policy. And this is a lawsuit that is being launched by congressional Democrats because they are not being allowed into ICE facilities to inspect the facilities. Now, I'm just curious whether, for you to game this out, whether there is legal high ground there. And also, might the government capitulate? Might the government open up these facilities and be more user-friendly from this standpoint? Can the president deny members of Congress their legal right to investigate these ICE facilities?
I think the House members will win. I think it's good that they hired counsel and that they're pursuing this. I think what we see from Trump and DHS, Kristi Noem, is that they will get away with anything, and I mean anything, that there's not pushback on. And that ultimately these things have to go to the courts. The idea that they could be worked out in a reasonable way, Trump and DHS and the Attorney General Bondi, to a large extent, they don't want to work anything out. It's performative. It's not trying to get to some mutually shared goal or accommodation. In this particular situation, it is expressly stated in statute, Mark, that a member of Congress can visit to see how these detention facilities are being maintained and that the rights the rights of detainees are being respected. They can do it on 24 hours notice. Well, DHS then said, no, it really takes 7 days. The statute says 1 day, but DHS, arrogates to itself this timeline of 7 days. So then they write a letter ahead 7 days in advance, and then they're met by somebody who says, no, we can't have you go up to the 10th floor because the 10th floor isn't a detention holding facility. The Congress members say, well, we understand that you have detainees that are being held up on the 10th floor. They say, well, yes, that's true, but it's not a detention facility. Well, that's even worse. It's a makeshift place with no bathrooms and no accommodations, and it's being used as a detention facility, is the exact thing that you would want to scrutinize as a member of Congress. So I think that's when they finally had it and said that they were going to go to court. Now, the Republican pushback, the Trump administration DHS pushback, will probably be that only Congress as a whole can ask for that, and Congress as a whole is Republican and won't do anything. But that doesn't make any sense. This seems like Congress would have thought this through, that there'd be one group in control of Congress, and there'd be many Congress members who were thinking, you know what, the group in power is not the one that is maintaining the detention facilities properly. We want to see whether people are being tortured, whether their rights are being denied. These are hellholes in America, Mark. They're all over the place. They're not in some black site in Iraq like they were under W. They're right here in our communities. These two Congress members were trying to visit one in Manhattan. And this is a terrible, terrible thing. It was terrible enough when it was abroad, but when it's right here in plain sight and the statute says that they're allowed to plainly view it and then they're denied their right to go view it. The other thing that you always see in these cases is that supposedly there's not a private right of action, that only some authority who's not these Congress members can bring it, or that they don't have standing, or somehow the president can trump their congressional power. But people need to always bear in mind their Article 1. The Constitution's built around Congress. Congress is Article 1 powers. The idea was we were going to have a Congress, they were going to decide things, and then they were going to have an executive carry out their orders. That's 2. And then they were going to have a judiciary independently, fairly decide all of them without favor or fear, and they were going to be Article 3. That's our constitutional setup, not some unitary executive that tells everybody what to do like in a dictatorship.
Well, that was the old setup, David. The welcome to America 2.0. They have American Oversight, which is one of the law firms representing the members of Congress, and there are, I believe, 12 members of Congress who have filed this lawsuit against the administration. With the Democrats in large numbers put this together, and they are saying the following. At a time when ICE is detaining more individuals than ever before, over 56,000 people, and reports of mistreatment, overcrowding, unsanitary conditions, and the detention of U.S. citizens are growing, the need for real-time, on-the-ground oversight has never been more urgent. blocking members of Congress from oversight visits to ICE facilities that house or otherwise detain immigrants clearly violates federal law, and the Trump administration knows it. And the DHS assistant there for communications says, oh, members of Congress could just schedule a tour. Instead, they're running to court to drive clicks and fundraising. So you kind of stated it bluntly and well, but you would think, and let me just read the tea leaves. You're saying they will capitulate, will they not? They're not. You're not going to actually have to run this all the way through the courts in the District of Columbia, are you?
No, they may have to run this through the courts. I think that people have to brace themselves to the fact that, this is to be the dominant monkey. This is not only to dominate the situation, but to appear to dominate the situation. And so they have to really need a court order. And then, of course, the Trump administration will blast the judges. They don't care if they were appointed by Trump in his last term. They don't care if they're Republicans. That's also the game plan, is to simply blast the courts and to act like we don't have Article 3, to act like we don't have an independent judiciary that can review and disqualify executive actions. We've had this since Marbury v. Madison. I mean, this is what the fundament of our whole country is, that there's a court. All of these countries, all these banana republics have beautiful constitutions. The problem is they don't have real enforcement, and they don't have independent judicial enforcement with life tenured judges who just try to call it right or wrong under the law and the facts and not be politically influenced, which is, if we're going to get into this new crowd that's in power right now in some of these U.S. attorneys' offices.
I love that what you just said, because it's something that we should all hear and remember. These countries, these banana republics, they have constitutions too. They have elections also, but people ignore them. The government ignores them and pushes through what they want and runs things as they want. Now, speaking of lifetime appointments and judicial appointments that fall into the controversial category, I take you to Emil Bove. During his confirmation hearing, I thought of you because they did rush the process through. There were numerous whistleblower reports, and then even beyond the whistleblower reports, there were all of these reports of Bove's clearly unconstitutional utterances, telling those who were involved in it was the deportation matter early on. Remember when they deported all those people to Central America without a court order and in violation of a court order? Bove was the one who said, F the court order, F the court, not important, just do what you have to do. This is the guy who was just confirmed to this third district, was it? Yeah. And tell me, first of all, what that means, because I'm told it's a breath away. Everything I read is like a breath away from a Supreme Court appointment. It's a very high appointment on the court.
There are 13 federal appellate courts around the nation, and they started in New England, so that gets to be the First Circuit. By the time they got out to California and the West and the West Coast, we're the Ninth Circuit. This Third Circuit is covering New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. As one of the wits said, if Tony Soprano were a real person and were really taken to federal court and he appealed, that would be the Third Circuit. Pennsylvania, Jersey, right, and Delaware. And it's an illustrious court, as many of these circuit courts are, except it has three now notorious, in my opinion, members. One was Alito, who went to the U.S. Supreme Court. One was Trump's sister, who resigned from the court as this investigation by the niece into the finances and how she alleged that she'd been cheated out of her money by Trump and his sister, the Third Circuit judge. And now it has Emil Bove, who seems to be one of the least confirmable people in American history, and yet he got confirmed. And the reason he's one of the most least confirmable people to a lifetime judicial appointment on the appeals court, as he is because they really had the goods on him. They had a fellow named Ruvani, who's now gone public and said, I'm scared to death, but I'm going public. This is my duty. I'm saying what happened. And what he says happened was that, as you just recounted, at a meeting, Bove said to him, F the courts. if the courts don't do what we want, if the courts don't approve what we want or allow what we want, we're going to do it anyway. F the courts. And he says that under oath. He says that as a whistleblower. He was willing to say that to the Senate committee. And Grassley, the 90-something-year-old head of that committee, refused to call him. The Republicans refused to call him. They had other witnesses. Apparently, there was a conference call that was very damning to Bove, and someone had a recording of it. And the argument was that that recording was inconsistent with Bove's testimony. That's a very polite way of saying that it smacked of possible perjury by the candidate. The candidate testified under oath, Bove, and here was a tape that surfaced that was inconsistent with that testimony. They also did not allow that, the Republicans, to be played. And then finally, they pushed him through 50-49. The two female Republicans, the usual suspects, thank goodness, voted against him. Murkowski and it's Collins, right, from Maine.
Right.
And then Tom Tillis, oh my goodness, he doesn't understand why he voted for Hegseth. He scratches his head every day that he affirmed Hegseth and incompetent. But here's this Tom Tillis who just voted to confirm this person. McConnell, oh, he cared about the rule of law and the courts. They could never get around to Merrick Garland. McConnell just voted to confirm this person. And 50-49, he slid through. And long after I'm gone, he'll be sitting either on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, or people are really worried that they're going to try to boost him to the U.S. Supreme Court. He is a true loyalist. Cannon down there in Fort Pierce, Florida, is crying bitter tears. It's not going to be you, Judge Cannon. It's not going to be you. It's going to be Emil Bove if they can get what's his name, Thomas or Alito to resign.
Right. That's
so
the
they'll probably
thinking.
look and see. It depends how they think the Senate's going. If they really think they're going to lose the Senate, then the Republicans will tell Alito or Thomas, this is your moment. While we have 53 Republican votes, you're going to step aside. We're going to put Bove up there. And presumably the same 50 who voted for him for the Court of Appeals will vote for him in the U.S. Supreme Court. That'll be Justice Bove to American lawyers and to our system of justice. And that's what people are so scared about. He's the guy, he's notorious for, if you didn't like the raid on the Capitol, if you didn't like the marauding, if you didn't like the 5 people who died on January 6th, he's the guy who orchestrated for Trump the pardons of all of those people, all the people who attacked police officers, who committed all these crimes against law and order and against the police, against individual police officers, who many of them are still, incapacitated, hurt. As I say, a couple of them are now not with us anymore. They're not alive anymore. Bove orchestrated that pardon for over 1,500 of the people convicted in that case or about to stand trial in that case. And of course, he's the notorious one, on top of everything else, for the Mayor Adams fiasco. He decided to give Mayor Adams a deal up there in New York. And it wasn't just that he was going to dismiss the case with prejudice. His idea was to dismiss it without prejudice, hold this sort of Damocles over Mayor Adams's head that a federal judge would not stand for. So they had to dismiss it with prejudice. But, it seems to me like it was a righteous case. And there's a case out here in LA right now, which just got dismissed too, against a big Trump donor. And, the lawyers always come out for that, but I'm a criminal defense lawyer. The lawyers come out and said, my client is so innocent, there was no case against him. But, they don't seem to want to win the case by motions to the court. They don't seem to want to win the case by winning or at least hanging the jury. They're so sure their client's innocent, but they never want to test that in a system where we have proof beyond a reasonable doubt and where the government would need all 12 votes beyond a reasonable doubt to vote them guilty. They seem to want to give a campaign contribution in the case of this one out here. And they want to do what Mayor Adams did, which was to basically say, oh, yes, I'll let ICE in anywhere. New York City hates ICE. Well, let you tell you, I'm going to get it look like a quid pro quo. And the 4 or 5 attorneys who were on it, Mark, wouldn't sign on. And then this Bove said to, this is according to, testimony under oath, right, Mark, that he said, look, in an hour, one of you guys is going to sign this, and you're going to be the head of the unit. But if you don't sign it, now he says, because that they can prove that. Now he says, oh, I didn't mean it as a reward. All I meant was if you're going to be rewarded and you're going to be the one promoted. If you're the one who signs it, that shows that you believe in the chain of command. And if you don't believe in the chain of command, you shouldn't be working for the government because people in the government believe in a chain of command and a hierarchy. So he's gotten caught over and over again on statements. There are reputable lawyers who are willing to say under oath or have tapes that show that he shouldn't have been confirmed. The Republicans just confirmed him with all Republican votes, 50-49.
Also, the pedigree of Bove is different than some of these other, even hard right wing justices that are in the pipeline for this. In the case of, I'm thinking of the Supreme Court, like Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, they're Federalist Society approved and on that list. Even other federal judicial appointments are coming from that Federalist Society pipeline. But this is not who Bove is. He's not a Federalist Society guy. He wouldn't be on that list. He is a henchman, straight up, former Trump defense attorney. Based on everything I've read, this guy doesn't even have the pedigree of a Kavanaugh or an Amy Coney Barrett. With all the problems that they have, they come through that Federalist Society, which is a hard right, Christo-fascist, I think, movement that is now finding its way into American life through the judicial system. But Bove isn't even from that. He is, as I say, he's a thug. He's a judicial thug for the President of the United States.
Well, one thing about Bove is Bove must have made good grades in law school because he did end up at the Southern District of New York. I mean, he got hired fair and square as an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, which is a hard place like my old district was. I mean, generally speaking, and we can get to this in a minute too, but generally speaking, you have to be very academically oriented. You have to have done very well in law school to get yourself in a position to be a clerk to a federal judge. And that's the normal pipeline to become an assistant U.S. attorney. I don't know if he was a clerk to a federal judge, but I do know that Bove at least had the pedigree in that sense. But I certainly agree with you, Mark, that he seems much more like a street fighter, including what people said about him during his tenure at the U.S. Attorney's Office, that while he was acting as a federal prosecutor, people have terrible reviews of his deportment, which, with this new interim now acting U.S. attorney out here in Los Angeles, the Central District of California, there have been all of these revelations of him screaming and yelling at people, acting totally inappropriately. That is not a normal thing. I mean, it's sort of hard to imagine, but I think people should imagine if they've never been in that environment. People are very polite. They have intellectual disagreements. Your boss disagrees with you on something. You don't hear him yelling down the hall. Apparently, this guy was a screamer, Bove, and the new interim now acting U.S. attorney in L.A. that it looks like we're going to have for another 9 months through this, what he himself calls a trick up their sleeve, due to this trick that Trump, Bondi, and Assange had up their sleeve. We're going to have Assange here in LA for another 9 months. And from all of these accounts, he's a screamer. Someone said, that he's actually in the office because you hear his voice booming down the hall, yelling at somebody. And that is really unusual. And I clerked for a judge. Obviously, we had intellectual disagreements. No one's voice ever boomed down the hall in over a year as a federal law clerk. I can't remember in over 6 years at the U.S. Attorney's Office anybody's voice booming down the hall. I mean, yelling is for people without power. We had a federal judge.
That's a great line.
We had a federal judge down here who used to scream and yell at people in his courtroom, and it's like, you have all the power, dude. He lived to be about 95, this judge, and he was a yeller and screamer and had that sort of bad deportment all the way to the end.
Well, Bove is an ethical train wreck based on everything that I've read. And I wanted to ask you about this. Michael D says, please ask David if Trump is stacking the court in New Jersey to protect him from legal prosecution there.
Well, he does have that golf course in New Jersey, and New Jersey is all one big district. So a case filed in federal court in New Jersey would go to this Third Circuit, and it would be handled by the U.S. Attorney's Office because there's just one U.S. Attorney's Office for New Jersey. But I don't think that's the reason. Now, this say what you want about the person they just put in the post. It's so controversial. Don't take my word. The federal judges in Los Angeles would not approve this person that Trump wants to be and is right now as we speak the acting U.S. attorney in L.A. It's just I don't know, Mark. It's gotten to a point. We will survive this, but the reality is people didn't used to look at this as well. 3.5 years is like, we're going to take power and we're going to do everything we want in 3.5 years. People thought, if you run things like this, if you run roughshod over everybody, including try to run roughshod over the federal judges who have life tenure, this is not a key for success. I mean, this U.S. attorney out here in L.A., he went on Glenn Beck's show and said some things that are just astonishing. And then they were repeated in Bloomberg News and in the front page of the LA Times. The LA Times has been running the story for people who aren't in LA on the very top, above the fold on the front page of the LA Times.
Yeah, this Bill Asaley, is that how he says his last name? Is that the guy in Los Angeles?
Well, it's hilarious because when you go to the grand jury, Mark, when you go to the grand jury, you present, of old times, you present a bill. And then they always vote a true bill because they'll indict a ham sandwich. Apparently, they won't indict a rotten ham sandwich because they have actually managed to find grand juries, who have rejected. These cases are so poor and the standard is probable cause. And there are people like, off the street who don't know anything about law and who are inclined to do whatever the government, which is there by itself with no defense attorney, whatever the government wants. Even those cases are so bad, they're so rotten that the grand juries have returned a no true bill, a no bill. So now everyone at the U.S. Attorney's Office, according to the reporting, calls Asaley no bill Asaley.
I want to ask you about the Epstein situation and the Ghislaine Maxwell meeting with the top Justice Department officials. I mean, we've talked about the unorthodoxy of this. I mean, how it's way out of bounds. Like in no universe would this happen. And Ghislaine Maxwell is saying, I don't really want to talk to anybody unless I get protection, immunity. And I'm wondering if you can just kind of give us a moment on that, both negotiation and that situation with Epstein from a legal standpoint and where Maxwell sits legally vis-a-vis Congress's demand to hear from her and also her situation with the judicial system.
Well, I've been covering Ghislaine Maxwell for a long time because her case went to trial in New York, and it was a huge story all over the country, all over the world, really, but especially in New York. So we were covering it all the time. One of the stations had rented a place in Chinatown, and you could see out the window. It overlooked the federal courthouse where she was, and it was a great shot. And it was a lot of coverage. And I remember the case so well in so many details. And she really didn't put on much of a defense. She thinks she has this legal defense, which is up in the U.S. Supreme Court right now, which we can talk about if you'd like to. But the reality is the U.S. Supreme Court is not going to take her case. They're not going to decide the case in her favor. And everyone who says that that's some big deal, the Supreme Court is meeting about her case. They meet on all the cases in late September to decide which ones they're going to schedule argument for next term. So in late September, I believe they're going to get together on her case and about 100 or 200 other people who would love to have their case heard by the U.S. Supreme Court. And they're going to deny a hearing on her case and on the other cases. The only thing I think that might prove me wrong is it will be so high profile by then that the U.S. Supreme Court will want to take it just because it's so high profile, but they're going to reject her legal claim. And just if I could take 30 seconds on that, because I don't hear it much reported in the news. Jeffrey Epstein is given a sweetheart deal down in federal court. That's by a U.S. attorney down there named Acosta. Acosta goes on to be a cabinet member for Trump in Trump 1.0. Acosta has to resign because he's given such a sweetheart deal to Epstein. And knowing what we knew later about Epstein, although people said knowing what he knew right then about Epstein, he shouldn't have given that sweetheart deal. The sweetheart deal was that he would not be prosecuted at all in federal court for this child sex trafficking, but he would only be prosecuted in state court, given a 1-year sentence. And during that 1-year sentence in state court, he would be allowed to basically do whatever he wanted to during the day and sleep in a barracks type place at night. Sweetheart, very sweet deal. As part of that sweetheart deal, he got even more. 4 unnamed co-conspirators were not going to be prosecuted in the Southern District of Florida. Ghislaine Maxwell was not named as one of those 4. It would be a stronger claim by her if she'd been one of the 4 people actually named. She wants to say, I was one of the 4 people. And the answer is, really? How come your name's not in there? But what's worse than that for her is that the deal is only covering the Southern District of Florida. And later on, she's prosecuted in the Southern District of New York because they have a case against her in the Southern District of New York. They have venue in the Southern District of New York. She made that motion timely that it should be dismissed because she should have gotten this derivative immunity from Epstein's agreement. The court said no. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals said no, and I believe the U.S. Supreme Court's going to say no. So people who say she has no reason at all for not putting on her defense before, she would say, I thought I was going to beat it on this legal argument, but now I didn't. I don't want to serve 20 years, and now I'm willing to talk. That's what she's going to say. What I think is that I don't believe a word that she has to say. She was investigated for, among other things, perjury. And you look at the charges and you look at her motivation, which is the only person who can get her out of this trouble because the U.S. Supreme Court and her motion are not going to do it. The only one who can get her out of her 20-year sentence is Trump. And so she's incredibly incentivized to say something like, yeah, it was a bunch of Democrats and Trump never had anything at all to do with any of the misconduct in this case. And then Trump says, oh my God, there's been a miscarriage of justice. The Democrats were in the process of railroading this lady. Thank goodness. This is another Liberation Day. And he'll cut her loose on a commutation. And people who say it won't happen, tell me what's going to stop it from happening. Anyone who says that's not going to happen, what is going to stop Trump and Maxwell and Maxwell's lawyer from doing that, along with Trump's personal lawyer, this Blanche guy. Now, this Blanche thing is out of this world. Blanche has no business whatsoever, not just because he's the #2 Department of Justice official, but because he's Trump's personal lawyer. And he even told Congress when he was being confirmed, would you consider yourself still Trump's lawyer? He even admitted, yes, I'd consider myself still Trump's lawyer. He went down there not to pursue justice, Mark, but to make sure that whatever she was going to say, he could hear it, he could interact with her. And let's just put it this way. He went down there because he didn't want anything she had to say to hurt Trump. And she got the message loud and clear, I believe, that she better not say anything that really hurt Trump because he'd be on his merry way, Blanche, and her commutation or pardon would also be on its merry way away from her. So it was completely, the one thing that's good is that there was an FBI agent. People have speculated, they don't know who was in the meeting. He would be not just criminal, but criminally insane, Blanche, if he went down there and there's no record of what happened. He wants to have a record to protect his butt. 4 years from now, Trump won't be in power anymore. And somebody will think to look back at what Blanche did. And Blanche at least wants to have a clear tape, a clear record with a couple of FBI agents and a tape that he didn't do anything wrong. And he's a very, very smart lawyer. So I'm sure he made sure he didn't do anything wrong.
So he went down there at the behest of Trump, you're saying, but he played it as close to kosher as you could play it, given the extraordinary nature of that meeting?
Yes, but you ask any lawyer, any former assistant U.S. attorney, they say what should have happened is that the prosecutor on the case who knew the case best should have gone down there along with the FBI agents who knew the case best. It doesn't seem like it was just happenstance right now that Maureen Comey was fired just a few days before that meeting went down, Mark, because she would have been the logical person to go. Now she's not with the government anymore. She can't go. And so instead of having a person like Ghislaine Maxwell interviewed by the person who knew the case best, because you know what they do in these things, they go into it, the prosecutors and the FBI agents, with a cooperator, would-be cooperator like her. They go into it thinking this is all going to be a pack of lies. They're just going to blow smoke up my you-know-what. And so they ask questions that they know the answers to. So many of the questions are ones that the investigators know the answer to see if they're going to catch the would-be cooperator on lies, minimizations. Blanche was not the right person to do that. Maureen Comey was the perfect person to do that. So my opinion is that they made sure she was no longer with the government so that it would be impossible that she be the one. And so it supposedly made some sense that Blanche was the one who went down there.
Well, you've talked about even in this conversation that that's kind of the MO. They did that in Los Angeles with that with the federal attorney there, the federal judge there. Is it they got rid of, help me, on that big deal with the fat burger guy in Los Angeles?
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah. This is incredible, this story. But then the key
was, would say,
yeah.
everyone's talking about the fact that they're never going to have a Johnny Rockets or a fat burger again. I mean, come on, pay your taxes.
Got rid. But they fired a career federal prosecutor to get just what you were talking about. That's what made me think of it.
There's a little wrinkle to that one. He's this fellow Adam Schleifer, if I'm saying his name right. So he is from a wealthy family, and as well as being a great lawyer, he's interested in politics. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, Adam Schiff went from that office to be, senator. He wanted to be a Congress member from Westchester, which is, I guess, where his family is. So with his talent and with his daddy's money, he ran for Congress as a Democrat. Guess what? He didn't have very nice things to say about Trump. He was running as a Democrat. So they're all upset at the things that he said as a candidate. He ended up finishing second. That's not good enough in politics. And so he got his job back at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he kept on with this big white collar case, which alleges that this fellow, I think his name is Andy Weidenhorn,
Right.
he's the head of Fatburger, Andy Weidenhorn, I think I'm saying that right, that he had a previous felony conviction. Then he's raided down here running Fatburger. Allegedly, he has a gun, which a felon is not allowed to have a gun. And now they're going to, he chooses Trump's first U.S. attorney. His name is Nick Hanna. So this Fatburger guy picks Trump 1's U.S. attorney, who's now back in private practice, this Nick Hanna. He hires Nick Hanna, and that's who represents this Wiedenhorn Fatburger guy in front of the U.S. Attorney's Office and this fellow who ran for Congress, who seems like a very efficient white-collar prosecutor who has the guy prosecuted. The IRS in a press release called this fellow a serial tax cheat. That's their editorialization, but that's not usual that the IRS puts out a press release to call a suspect in a case a serial tax cheat. And now this new U.S. attorney, that he also made substantial campaign contributions, this Weidenhorn did, to Trump. And now Trump 1's U.S. attorney has convinced Trump 2's U.S. attorney, this no-bill Asali, to dismiss the case without prejudice. They don't have an interest in this case, Mark, to hold a sort of Damocles over the head of this guy. And you might say, well, when come the restoration in 3.5 years, if the restoration of the rule of law is coming back in 3.5 years, they could still go after this fellow and just, take him to trial on the case that they have indicted and that's ready to go. But that's so unlikely. So basically, the Fatburger guy is going to walk. Allegedly charges that he underpaid the IRS over $45 million, being a convicted felon in an earlier case.
Yeah,
and they're also going to dismiss. They're also going to dismiss the felon in possession of the firearm, which I don't understand.
The MO was that again the DOJ fired the career prosecutor, the career federal prosecutor, to get that done. To get
the only thing I'm saying about that is that some of these are completely out of left field. These firings. This one you could have predicted because he was a Democratic candidate for Congress. Again, if you had a crystal ball that went backwards, which you don't have in life. If you had, perfect recall probably when Trump won, that case should have been handed off to a different assistant U.S. attorney so that they couldn't make this argument. But yeah, Mark, I mean, yes. And you look at one after another, each one may have a slight anomaly, but the pattern is overwhelmingly clear.
Exactly. And then so it brings me to what is one of the greatest fears with a rising autocrat and the Trumpian flex that is all about recrimination and revenge. What are they doing with Boasberg? Now, Boasberg, this judge, is the U.S. District Court judge who has been in the back and forth with the Trump administration over the deportations to Venezuela and, those who ended up, the Venezuelan men in El Salvador. So the DOJ is now going after him. They issue a complaint, quote, making improper public comments about President Trump and his administration. In this complaint, they cite Boasberg's attendance at a judicial conference of the United States in which the judge warned that the Trump administration could, quote, disregard rulings of federal courts and trigger a, quote, constitutional crisis. They also, again, talk about his handling involving the alleged members of the Venezuelan gang, the Tren de Aragua, and the ones who were flown to that Salvadoran prison. So they're going after Boasberg, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this because this, again, seems of a kind, going up against those judges who dare to stray and dare to, in any way, go up against this administration with even a critical word.
Well, Mark, this is how they try to cower judges in third world countries, in authoritarian countries. The good news is it won't work in America. This is absolutely stupid garbage. It's performative. This investigation of this judge is going to go nowhere. As people may remember, he's Kavanaugh's big buddy from Yale. He's totally middle of the road. He's not some flaming leftist as they tried to portray him. And he's actually the chief judge of the district court in Washington, D.C., which my judge had the honor of being the chief judge down there, too. So it's a very important post that he has. It's one that has life tenure. The review of him, because he is the chief judge, would be by the chief judge of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, who, for people who like this sort of thing, is an Obama appointee, brilliant fellow. And what normally happens with these, and what's going to happen with Boasberg's, is it's going to go nowhere because there's no there there. If you don't like a judge's ruling, first of all, you have appeals. We allow appeals in this country. And as we can see on your show, week after week, appeals courts reverse lower courts. That's what you do. You don't go crying off to the, judicial performance committee if you don't like a judge's ruling. You make your record and then you appeal. And if you're in the right, you ought to win. That doesn't always happen. No system is perfect, but we have a system to deal with judges who make errors. This judge, number one, didn't make any error. He's the turn the planes around judge. He's the one where the plane hasn't even left yet. It looks like it left. This is with him ordering it that it not go. This is the one where the government said that, oh, well, it was only an oral order. We didn't think an oral order had any effect. Like when a federal judge tells you from the bench, do not do such and such. Do you understand my order? That you can disregard it because you can wait for 3 hours later for the written version of it. Because, in that situation, it could be 2 weeks later that you get the written order. If that were really the law, that would be absurd. So all of this case, and then they didn't bring him back. This is the Abrego Garcia, that case too. They didn't bring the people back from El Salvador, and they finally brought him back. That's a whole other fraught story. What he said, by the way, doesn't even appear to have been a public comment. It was said at a judicial conference and among judges, which was not meant to be public. Somebody must have had a wire, maybe some right-wing staffer who was there, listened to the conversation, heard what he was saying to the judicial conference because one of the judges' clerks or interns or somebody was there and maybe was having a tape recorder. So supposedly there's a tape of him saying something. So it's not even public. And on top of that, it's not misconduct. He says Trump could be in violation, could be planning to violate judicial orders, which not only is not an impermissible comment, it seemed to be right on and true. Okay. And if he were to violate orders of judges, that would be a constitutional crisis. Also true, he could violate judicial orders, and if he did, that would be a constitutional crisis. So it wasn't public, it wasn't misconduct, it's going nowhere, but it shows, right, a kind of performative get back at you. And it also shows that this crowd that's in there right now, Mark, they have no sense of the long term. None of them, I guess, plan to be there in 4 years. Boasberg will still be a judge. Those judges that they sued in Maryland as the entire bench in Maryland, those judges will all still be judges. It is so self-destructive. It's just, I don't know. I mean, does Bondi not intend to be a lawyer afterwards? I mean, you look at the comments that Asadi made about the bench, about the federal judges in our district. He said they're left-wingers. The U.S. Attorney's Office is full of left-leaning judges. I wish they'd lean left on some of my cases. I'm a working lawyer. I'm a working lawyer. A little bit more compassion for my clients would be very well taken. It is about these left-leaning, and then he said bad things about the FBI, which is just astonishing. They need to change their culture. What's wrong with the FBI's culture, Mark? I don't get it at all.
Well, I mean, the rhetoric, I mean, the two things. First of all, the rhetoric, it's just one of flame throwing. I mean, it's these blowtorch rhetorical moments that all of these people are part of. And it's become the hymnal from which they all sing. But the other thing is that they're only playing for the moment. I mean, I don't think they have that time horizon that you do. They don't have a sense of, I mean, they are reshaping America, David Katz. I know I have a very grim view of things and you have a very bright view of the future because you operate in a system, the judicial system, which we're all really counting on in ways that are even more amplified, I'd suggest, or amplified more, might be the way to put it, by the fact that these other institutions that we were counting on are going away. I mean, Congress evaporates, any kind of regulatory structure on finance, on the economy, on all of the things that would maybe check corruption, frankly, that's all evaporating. So we count on the judicial system, and that's why we turn to you. And you operate within a judicial system that seems to still have retained some semblance of order. But I'd suggest that a lot of the things that they're doing, again, they're not on the same time horizon. They don't see it as, oh, eventually I might have to deal with the judicial system after I'm out of office, and I might have to answer for what I do. And I also think that on some level, they feel as though we're shaping the judicial system now in a way it hasn't been shaped before, and I will be protected before I leave office.
Well, I think one reason that it's concerning, I don't want to make this, about me, but I've been able, without joining like a large firm, having a very small practice, I've been able to attract clients who think, this guy has a lot of talent in federal court, and his talent will out. No matter what political party the judge is from, and no matter what political party is controlling the U.S. Attorney's Office. But you look at these things that are happening. You look at, one of my really big clients said, I really want to hire you, but maybe I should just try to pay the senator in my state. And I said, this is America. This is America. You can flush your money down the toilet. You can pay the senator in your state, but you need to have the best lawyer you can have in federal court who knows the law and the procedures in federal court. Well, I mean, what are these cases telling? What are these cases teaching? One other story, I had a fellow from abroad. This has to be 15 years ago. And I think at that time he paid me $25,000. And about a week later, he says, have you spoken to the judge? And I said, no, the hearing's in another 2 weeks. A week later, he says to me, have you spoken to the judge? I said, no, I'm in the library, And he says, oh, you're very smart. You talk to the judge in the library. So, there's people from abroad who just cannot.
I'm sorry to laugh, but you're right. They just assume that it's a system of corruption.
What does America look like now? Look at the cases that we're just talking about. What does America look like? What is our system of justice? And, people say we're exaggerating it too much. No. People come to this country because of the rule of law. They invest trillions of dollars in this country because of the rule of law. And the idea that, your opponent can just, can exert such political influence, including on the justice system. That's one reason people don't want to invest in a lot of countries where it looks like you can make money, because you know that you're going to go into a real swamp, not the one that Trump has talked about all these years, and then he's swampier than anyone. But, you don't want to be in that kind of a swamp. So on a very personal level, I hope it goes back to where everybody just wants to hire the very best attorney they can find who knows the facts and the law, and that's the way to get the best result in federal court. But, what does the Adams case teach? What does this latest case in LA teach? What lessons are people deriving from them?
Yeah, I mean, the system is being corrupted. All right, I'll let you go, but not before you answer the question from Robert, who writes in. We have an email address, themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com.
I've received a lot of positive letters.
Here's a question. Here's a question for David Katz. This is an interesting non-political question, Robert says. There is a rumor that astronomer CEO Andy Byron, who was caught at that Coldplay concert, you'll remember, might sue Coldplay for this Jumbotron incident. If he did sue David Katz, would he have a case? I would think, I'm not done, David Katz. Let me finish Robert's letter. I would think, he goes on, it's not long, but it's...
I've received a lot of positive letters.
Okay, let me finish, please. I would think, given that he should have no expectation of privacy, Robert is suggesting, that he could not sue based on a violation of his privacy. But maybe there is another valid angle that he could pursue that would go up against the kiss cam and maybe get rid of the kiss cam going forward. He said, again, this is just a rumor. Please ask David Katz this legal question. Now, sir, what do you say?
Well, so this wouldn't be an instantaneous stump the Katz. You were nice enough to send me Robert's question. I thought about it. It is a public place. So having your picture taken in a stadium, I just don't see it. Put on the Jumbotron, I just don't see it. I think if he really hires a lawyer and the lawyer wants to research this case, I think they would go back and look at what Coldplay has done before and see, I know Coldplay has a song called Yellow, and during Yellow, it's romantic, says, I love you. And that's when they do the kiss cam. And if they've done the kiss cam at prior ones and things like that have happened, if this is his line whenever someone shirks away from the camera, if this is the front man for Coldplay, I don't know his name,
Sure.
if this is the thing, and he's done this before and he's had any kind of untoward incident, but it just didn't get this widely publicized, that might be something that Coldplay guy knew that he was potentially inflicting emotional distress, because even though they shouldn't be doing that, if you're going around inflicting emotional distress on people, they might settle this case. But unless there's some pattern of ridiculing people by the Coldplay, because the Coldplay guy says when they shy away from the kissing on the camera, he says something like, are those folks having an affair or are they just shy? If he said that at 3 or 4 other concerts before that during the kiss cam, and something untoward happened after that, or somebody got really upset after that, but I just see this one as going nowhere.
Several people have said that on the back of the ticket, in the stub of the ticket, of course, it's all digital now, but anyway, somewhere in the terms and conditions, there's just the understanding that you may be photographed, et cetera. That may be as well, huh, David Katz?
That may be an adhesion contract, like those things that used to be on the back of the parking tickets when you parked at certain places. I don't think that if he otherwise had a good claim that he waived it or forfeited by not grousing about his ticket or by buying a ticket. Anyway, the baseball ticket used to say that you assume the risk of getting hit by a ball, but the people who got hit by the ball and really hurt, the baseball teams would defend on the fact that, assumption of the risk. And I think they ended up, as the courts, got more, I think, sophisticated and seeing some poor person who was terribly disabled by being hit by a ball, they started putting up nets, right, in the area where the batted balls were really likely to hurt somebody, and not relying on.
But just to be clear, in the baseball parallel that you suggest, baseball did not settle. They pointed to the back of the ticket.
They pointed to the back of the ticket, and I think they still point to the back of the ticket. But the better part of valor was to put up those nets. So
I understand that it changed the way they did things, but they didn't have to pay any kind of settlement. The point is that they as a result of the legal action or perhaps the complaints, they put up those safety nets, et cetera, but they didn't actually pay out. I'm getting to the reason I asked the question is I'm getting to the Coldplay thing by saying you can get rid of the kiss cam or whatever because you just don't want this kind of hassle anymore. But the reality is they're not going to settle with these people because of the understanding, the implicit understanding or explicit understanding if it's in the terms and conditions.
Also, it's really different to have a plaintiff who's been terribly injured by a batted ball, right? This is never going to have the sympathy of a jury. Coldplay in the stadium are never going to shirk. They're not going to shirk from this case. So I love when people send in their questions. Just give me a little heads up.
It's the Mark Thompson. The Mark Thompson Show at gmail.com. You can write in if you've got questions for David Katz. They can be politically related. I always can use the help. So I really do appreciate it.
Mark, I'm your legal commentator, but News Nation now has me on like most weekends now, and they call me a Democratic strategist, which I think that developed because their other guest is a Republican strategist, and they figured, well, if we want to be fair and they really do want to be fair and balanced, News Nation. And so they figure if they have a Republican strategist, they should have a Democratic strategist. So, we were talking
congratulations
about
on your new title then. Yeah.
Trump slumping in the polls. And we run usually about 4 or in the afternoon Pacific time, about 4 or 5 o'clock Saturday.
On the weekends. Well, all I have to, well, then if I can just mention this because you're now this big, big dude who's the Democratic strategist or whatever they call you there, I guess the Democratic strategist. I would say this to you Democratic strategists and to everybody who wants the hopium of Trump of sagging in the polls. I'd look at your own polls. Look at the Democrats' polls. It's brutal. It makes Trump look like Jesus Christ. The Democrats do not have the corresponding buoy that you might expect with this mess that Trump has created. They still don't poll very well. Now, I'd love to talk to you about this more, but I guess what I'm saying is just because Trump is sagging doesn't mean when the moment comes that voters are going to vote out the GOP and vote in the Dems. I think it's going to be a very hard fought midterm. And I didn't even get to the redistricting. I'm really, did I? I don't even think I asked you about that. I really feel bad that I've let it go this long. Go ahead.
Two things, Mark. Sagging in the polls is a lot better than soaring in the polls.
Yeah,
and
that's
number
true.
two,
That's true.
A lot of it's motivation for midterms. The problem with the midterms is that people are not as motivated as they are in the presidential race, and Democrats are extremely motivated. All the polls show that the excitement to go vote and to go vote, the Democrats in the midterms is much greater than the Republicans don't have that enthusiasm. And so I think the midterms are going to be okay. On the redistricting, we cannot have unilateral disarmament. If Texas is going to play this game, we have to play this game. To just sit there and say, oh, I don't know what happened. We took the high road and now the Republicans still control the House like they do the rest of government. We still control the House in a year and a half by 2 or 3 votes, because when they redistricted Texas, we didn't redistrict California, or New York didn't redistrict California. That would be unilateral disarmament. That would be the end of the Democratic Party, showing that it's not willing to fight.
Exactly. So glad you touch on it. And by the way, just on the legal side, they are suing over the redistricting as well. And they're suing and they'll sue in a bunch of different states. I mean, this is a real legal effort. And as you say, it has to be matched by a redistricting commitment that is in Democratic states the same way it is in Republicans. I think that's the only way to play ball now.
Mark, California can put it right back if Texas puts it right back. This is a total reciprocal thing. So if Texas backs down now, California will back down. If Texas does this, we'll do it. And then in 2 years, if we see it's really unwieldy, and if Texas sees it's unwieldy, that their game's not working, and they back down, we'll back down. There's also, by the way, well, let's leave it there. Anyway, okay. Great to be with you, Mark.
Great to be with you. Everybody else who has questions for Katz, put them in an email, send them to us at the show, and then we'll make sure he gets them. Okay, I think that's a better way to go with a greater coherence than just kind of throwing stuff at him now. The Mark Thompson Show at gmail.com. David, so grateful for your time. Thank you so much. We'll watch for you on News Nation this weekend, and we'll see you here next Thursday. Thanks, pal.
Pleasure's mine. Take care.
David Katz, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.